Madeira, Manchester, Madrid, Turin, and Manchester again. Aguero! Goal for South Africa! Goal for all Africa! Roma have risen from their ruins!
Welcome back to the On Yellow podcast, episode 20.
Our podcast can almost legally drink in the United States.
Exactly. We are so close. One more episode to go. Zach, you are dripped out for the occasion right now.
Right? Somebody left me some sick sunglasses in here, man.
Are you going to do the full episode?
We got the drip on for this episode.
Looking like the Terminator?
We'll see. Probably not, but...
Are you going to be back next episode?
What do you mean? The Terminator?
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
Oh, God.
I'm
not going to try Arnold right now. I'm not going to try that. Well, the episode, is named Cup Champs. Should be named Celebration, really, because obviously we're celebrating hitting the 20 episode mark. But you know who else is celebrating?
Manchester City.
Yeah, my least favorite team on the planet, Manchester City. They are celebrating an EFL Cup trophy win, beating Arsenal last Sunday 2-0 from 2 goals from someone that doesn't normally score. And
Nico O'Reilly. Do you think he's kind of putting his name out there for a call up to the English national team?
Potentially. He potentially is. Obviously, I don't think he was named in the 35-man squad that Tuchel is bringing for the 2 friendlies that they're having during international break. So I don't think so. But, he could be a contention in the future. Obviously, he has an insanely high ceiling. He's a player that, just broke into that team and now is getting a lot of starting minutes, especially since, a lot of their really good fullbacks are either injured or just off the team now. Obviously, Kyle Walker's been off the team for a couple seasons now, and they're trying to fill the fullback spots. And they found it with Nico O'Reilly. He's really, really good right now. It's kind of crazy because both of the goals that he scored, so both of them were in the second half, and they were both headed goals. But you got to say on one of them, you got to say Kepa that game. I feel bad for him. Obviously, he's not a starting goaltender, but Kepa's lost in a ton of finals. I just don't think it was the right decision to place him. I don't know why Raya wasn't starting because he was on the bench. Was he battling an injury or?
I think they were just rotating the squad.
So they decided to rotate the squad on a final?
I guess.
Yes, the EFL
City
Cup
did the same.
Yes, and the EFL Cup trophy isn't really that much of an important trophy, but for Arsenal, who haven't won a trophy in 7 to 8 years, the last time they won was in the FA Cup. I think for Arsenal, it's a huge game. It's a huge game for the Arsenal fans, and I just think that Kepa, I don't know if he was the right choice. A cool stat for, Nico O'Reilly, he had a 9.1 rating on FOTMob. He had scored the 2 headers in 4 minutes of each other. And, he had 100% aerial duels won, which for defender is a really, really good stat, right? It shows, if you're good in the air, obviously he's good in the air because he scored 2-headed goals, but he's also good in the air defensively. And I think that well-roundedness and versatility is something that a fullback really needs. And, I think with O'Reilly, I think he still needs to grow into the player that he wants to become. I've watched him, especially one of the games was the Manchester Derby. Obviously Man City didn't play well, but O'Reilly came off the bench and he didn't really show that much. And he didn't really play that well. And I think it led to us, scoring. I don't know if it was one of the goals that was disallowed, but, obviously he's still young. You know how old he is? Do you know how old he is?
I believe he's only 21.
21, yeah. So, he still has time. And I think for Man City, that's kind of been an aging squad, in my opinion. They've really kind of gone away from that, getting some new players into that system and trying to get, younger now. Obviously, with the additions of Donnarumma, who's, only 26 years of age, I believe. And then you filter it in with a lot of other players. Obviously, you have Erling Haaland, you have Foden, and a lot of players that are still in their 20s, and I think that's important for a squad, especially a squad that wants to stay at this high echelon. They need to rotate. They need to be able to evolve with the game. I think Man City and Guardiola have done that, and they've done it in previous seasons as well. And I think they've gone to this time now. One thing though, this is the 7th final the Gunners have lost. And, it just kind of begs the question, is this loss in the EFL Cup final a changing of the tides when it comes to the league? Or do you think that Arsenal still have that?
I think at this stage, it would take some pretty favorable results for City for anything to change in the title race.
Yes.
And as you know, to win the Premier League title, you don't need to win a final.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit less pressure than having it necessarily lie on one game. And I think it would have to be a big shakeup for anything to change at this point.
Exactly. I mean, we talk about like the winning mentality of Arsenal, and I think right now with Arsenal, it's just trying to maintain the points that they have. Because obviously, even a draw for Arsenal, if they can keep getting points, they're still going to be the 9 points up between them. Obviously, the gap will close if they start losing and Man City starts winning. But 9 gaps, especially with like 7 games left this season, that's a huge amount of points. Obviously, Man City has a game in hand, but that still won't affect anything. I think I agree with you. Like Arsenal would have to really blow it in order to lose. I think that is kind of typical Arsenal fashion to bottle it, but I think this year it is going to be a Gunners victory, especially in the Premier League. But also, will this affect other championships that they're in? Like, obviously, they're in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, and they're also in the Champions League knockout stages. Do you think that this loss in the Carabao Cup will either give fire to them wanting to do well in these other competitions, or it will be a big loss and something that would really hurt a team like Arsenal?
Well, I think it will give them that fire to, try a little harder or perform a little better. But deep down, if they end up going down a goal, then that doubt might start creeping in again. So it's pretty situational. But coming into the game, I believe it'll make sure that they try a little bit harder and they try and play their game instead of chasing the game.
Exactly. Obviously, this game, Arsenal did not play well. I think actually both sides didn't play that well, but Arsenal was kind of the standout, especially a team that is, so high up in the table and are, the front runners for a lot of these championships. I think for Arsenal, it's really, really rough.
Well, if you look at the cup finals that Man City has been in the last couple of years, and there's a stark pattern forming where Erling Haaland does not score.
Yes.
I don't think he's ever scored in a final for Man City.
No.
And it continued in this game.
Yeah, exactly. He was absent. He didn't do great. But I think with what comes with teams, though, it's like if your number 9 isn't playing well, if the other players on your team are playing well, it doesn't really matter. I think, it changes. I think with championship teams, it's just they have a winning mentality, and all the players do. So even if one player isn't playing well, the others are going to play well. And I just think that is really. I just think that's something that Man City has had in the recent championships, especially the ones that they've won. They've had other players come into their system and do really, really well. Whether it was Foden, whether it's Rodri, they have a guy that if Haaland isn't playing well, they have a guy that is going to score for them and be that guy. And it's just really cool to see. But, Arsenal, like, I don't really know. Like, they didn't look like a team, in my opinion, that is 9 points up in the table in the Premier League. They really struggled with injuries. I think we didn't understand how much impact Ødegaard and Eze actually had on this team until both of them weren't playing, and they had Havertz play in that number 10 role. Havertz, obviously, he did get robbed and against Donnarumma. He had a shot on net, but he didn't really produce the same amount of successful passes and line breaking passes that an Ødegaard would have done and would have employed. And I think he could have made a difference in the squad. Eze, again, as well, is a big miss because Eze has been very good this season. And he's been kind of the crucial guy in a lot of their games that they've won. So I think I would have liked to see him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts aren't necessarily on the players they're missing. It was the players that have to step up when those players are missing, like your Saka. He's not been very good this season at all. He's been a very substandard season for the standards that he holds himself to, and Arsenal fans praise him as being this world-class player, but he really doesn't have the goal contributions to back that up this season. And you see a guy like Victor Gyökeres, who's been your starting striker. You're missing players that he's been playing with for most of the season now.
Do you think Gyökeres is that number 9? Like, do you think he is
he's
their
better
guy?
than Jesus?
Yes.
Like, he's been the best player they've had at striker for a while. And he scored enough goals in my mind to where he is a fairly effective number 9 for them. But when it comes to a game against Man City where you're missing some players, you need that guy that you spent all this money on to be that player in the big game, not just the games against any sort of bottom table team that gets you a win towards the Premier League title.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I have a stat line here of Gyökeres. He kind of struggled, and he had 0 aerial duels won, which is a stat that you would expect a guy who's like 6'4". You'd expect him to win some aerial duels, especially just how number 9s work, right? But another stat line, he had 2 touches in the opponent's box. He had 17 touches in total. Only 2 of them were in the box, and he had 0 shots. So, for a number 9, shooting is kind of your job. So, he was just playing really poor, and I agree. Like, those players need to step up if you don't have the other players. If you have a winning mentality and you're a team that is driven to win the championship, I think any player that comes and gets subbed on or plays in a position with a guy who's injured, I think they are the ones that should step up because they have a mentality, and all of them should have that mentality of we need to win. And especially for Arsenal, I think it's really, really sad for Arsenal fans that your team is doing so well this season, but can't win that one game that really matters, and that's to get a cup, right? I think, for Arsenal, the Carabao Cup meant way more than City winning it. City, it's just another championship. Even Pep Guardiola in his press conference talked about how it's just the Carabao Cup or just the EFL trophy, right? We're not like, yes, we're happy of winning, but we have other things in mind. Of course, with the league and the FA Cup to try to get another trophy. But for Arsenal, this means way more, right? They've been in a trophy drought for so long that even just a Carabao Cup trophy is something that I think would mean so much to a team and a franchise like that. So I think, they should have played like that, played a better game, knowing that this matters so much to not just them as a team, but them as a whole fan base.
I think it was a missed opportunity to try and get some more momentum towards the other trophies that they care a little bit more about.
Exactly, right? Now, I want to go to City's perspective a little bit more here. Obviously, they were they won 2-0. But you've been talking about this guy since he joined Man City, and that is Abdulkadir Kushinov. Now,
Well, he's been in some of my EAFC teams through the use of evolutions.
exactly. So where is he from again?
He's I can't Uzbekistan. I
Uzbekistan?
believe, yeah.
Yes.
He's the driving force of getting that team to the World Cup.
Exactly. And, he had a great game, like insanely good game for a young center back. He had 90% accurate passes. He had the 5 passes into the final third, and he had 5 clearances. I think both of the defenders did really well. Nathan Ake did very well as well. Seeing that Man City were missing their 2 main center backs in Ruben Dias and Gavardiol.
Well, Gavardiol's a fullback.
But he plays center back for them.
They were missing Gahey.
They're missing Gahey as well. They're missing both of them. Because Josko Uvardiol can play both fullback and center back. But, they were missing a lot of their defenders, needless to say. So, I mean, obviously, Nico O'Reilly came in to fill that one gap, and Ake and Kushinov came in to fill the other gaps. And, I think it just shows that how much depth Man City has. Obviously, Man City have kind of been a fragment of their former selves in recent years, but they've really done a lot of good signings through youth signings, and they've done a really good job in getting people for the future.
Well, they signed Kushinov from Lens, I believe, last season, and he got a decent amount of game time, and then he kind of just got completely left out of the squad at the end of the season there. And this season, I don't think he's seen that much game time. Obviously he got into this game because of injuries, but I think it would be good to see him get a little bit more game time, because when he has played, he's shown that he can be a good defender. And, I mean, in a cup final against the best team in the league, he was arguably one of the best players on the pitch. And I think that says a lot about just his poise and how he can perform under pressure. And he's a player that is young and definitely has a chance to break out into their team, but they have so many strong center backs. It's tough to kind of break out, especially with the winter signing of Mark Gahey.
Exactly, and I think that's just another thing where it's like Kushinov, yes, he might be utilized, but would you be open to seeing him get a loan move, or do you think that he's in a pretty good position on that team?
Well, I think a loan move wouldn't necessarily make too much sense. He's 22. He's worth a pretty penny. Any team that's loaning him would have to pay a fairly hefty loan fee, especially with the risk of injury. He is great cover, a great depth player for them. It just proves the point that I think the starters this season for Arsenal have been a little bit better than Man City. But I think in terms of what's on the bench and what's available as depth pieces, Man City is far and above the most the deepest team in the Premier League, and the team that has the most cover in any position.
Exactly. I mean, you just talk about almost all of the positions that they have. They have someone that can come in and replace them. I think the number 9 position, since Alvarez has left, kind of.
Well, they got Marmoush though too.
Oh, I guess they just got Marmoush as well. Who can play?
Who can play striker or on the wing.
Yeah,
and he was one of the best players in the Bundesliga last year, and it's crazy to say that he's a depth piece that doesn't always play.
Well, yeah, it just shows how much depth they have. He was a FIFA legend. Last season and the season before, it seemed like he got so much Player of the Month cards. It's like every year or every season, it was just Player of the Month, Player of the Month, Player of the Month every month. And it's just it's kind of funny. It's kind of like Igor Thiago this year. It seems like he's always getting Player of the Month.
When Marmoush does play, he seems to always put in, a great performance.
Yeah.
I think, he's kind of the season started with Doku kind of being a starting winger, and he's had a rough season. And I think Marmoush has kind of stolen that spot now, so it's good to see him get more involved towards the end of the season as they push towards the the finals and trying to win the FA Cup and potentially not the Champions League, they got out, but the
league.
Premier League.
Exactly.
And I think, he's a player that at the start of the season people were surprised to see him kind of go to City, I think, because they had Holland and they didn't really need a striker. So it was a bit of a surprising move for some people, I think.
Yeah, because he was linked with a ton of other teams. I think he was linked with Liverpool before they were linked with Isak. And I just think that, he's just a really good player. I think he just scores bangers too. Like,
Too bad he didn't pick Canada.
Yeah, he could have picked Canada. So because he is from here, isn't he?
I think he's born in Egypt and he grew up here a little bit and then moved back. So he could have technically played for Canada.
Yeah.
But imagine a Jonathan David and
a Marmouche, exactly.
Partnership.
It would be epic. And obviously he's a really strong player. His debut goal for Manchester City, where he scored from like 45 yards out, was a beauty. And it just shows how much skill he has. But yeah, he's been like a bench player for that team just because they have one of the best strikers in the world on their team right now in Erling Haaland. Quick side quest. Have you seen Erling Haaland's YouTube channel?
I haven't, but I've seen him in the Sidemen Guess the Footballer challenge, and he was talking about how he doesn't think that it'd be a championship player because there's no way they'd be here recording the video on like a Thursday. But well, he's literally a Premier League player doing the exact same thing.
Exactly. And that was a great video, but I was doing some digging because obviously that video was kind of a collaborative post between Erling Haaland's channel and the Sidemen's channel, and I was looking at some of Erling Haaland's videos. He's done some pretty cool things. So he's done a vlog video. Like I think he does vlogs. I don't know how much vlogs he's done because I've only seen one of them. But he also does other things during like Christmas and Halloween, where he goes to like fans' houses.
I always see the Instagram and Snapchat stories of him like watching a random game or playing Fortnite or something.
He's like playing Minecraft a lot too. He's like has this one post like saying "with the boys" or something. So that's kind of cool. But like I was watching and it's like he dressed up as the Joker, and then went to like fans' houses or something. Or went around.
Why was he going to fans' houses as the Joker?
It was for Halloween or something. Because he went for Christmas. He dressed up as Santa, and he went to fans' houses and gave them like Man City merch and stuff. And then of course they knew it was Haaland straight away from seeing him. But they tried to do like prosthetics and like everything. And I saw that video. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I saw another video. Like I don't know why I'm going on this tangent right now, but I am. I saw Erling Haaland, he was doing like a vlog, and he was showing where he gets his milk. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He gets like milk straight from the farm. Like, is that what professional footballers in England do all the time?
I thought you meant he was just going into the Tesco.
He was just walking in.
Yeah, this is the Tesco that I go to get my milk here in Manchester.
Here's my meal deal. Like, but I think the game's evolving. That's what we can say about this segment. Like, players aren't they're not just like, they're always kind of in the media's eye. And Haaland's just decided to do YouTube.
Well, it reminds me of not a soccer player, but an NBA player, Jared McCain, who posts vlogs of just like training, doing his daily life. And he's like a part-time YouTuber while still being a professional basketball player.
Exactly. And there was Ben Foster, who used to do the cycling GK, where he would play goalkeeper in the Premier League and then do his vlogs, and then also do his vlogs of the cycling stuff. So like I think that's just really cool how we can kind of get an inside lens into a footballer's life. It's not just headlines and newspaper articles. It is just their life, and I think that's really neat to see.
And I think when a player has that connection with social media in a way like that, it makes it so they understand how the media works when they're doing interviews and things. They know that if they say something a certain way, it'll be more likely to go viral or something. So they're a little bit more in tune with what reporters and like fans and things are looking for in responses.
And Erling Haaland's been known for his post-match interviews, obviously being a character with those. So that is, really, really cool. I just want to talk a little bit more about that game. James Trafford was in net. He got to play, and he did really well, actually. Obviously got the clean sheet, but he hasn't gotten that much game time for Manchester City.
He kind of got shafted.
Yes.
Because, they bought James Trafford and then they were offered the chance to sign Donnarumma, and no team is realistically turning down that chance to sign Donnarumma.
Well, it was an extremely cheap fee for Donnarumma, too. It was like $30 million.
So I believe they paid more for James Trafford than they did for Donnarumma, which is crazy. But I think James Trafford was expecting to come into that Manchester City team, where he originally was playing, in their youth teams, and got, went to Burnley and was, a very good player for Burnley in the Championship, and, got that move back to Man City in hopes of, moving up the ladder and becoming a top starting goaltender in the Premier League. And then, he was the starter for maybe a week before Donnarumma got brought in.
And like we said, he was the starter for Burnley, and realistically, he could be a starter on another Premier League team because he has a lot of talent and a lot of skill. He did a save against Saka. That was Saka's only shot that whole game. That, I believe, could have been the only shot in game or the only shot on target. But, he played really well, especially for a goaltender. It's difficult to, we saw it on the other side. The reality of, not having that much game time is you can either be like a Kepa or you can be like a James Trafford. And sometimes that just is how the game goes. And as a goaltender, it's like you have to, game time is key, right? Like, you can do everything in training, but if you're not playing in a game time situation, then it's really hard to train in that position. And I think James Trafford has done a really good job. Obviously, he's trying to show, Guardiola that he is a really good goaltender. And I don't think Guardiola thinks that he's a bad one. I just think that they got him, but realized, if we can get Donnarumma for $30 million, a Champions League winning goalkeeper and one of the best goalkeepers in the world, I believe a Golden Glove winner as well, then he could, realistically, I think it's a Yashin Trophy winner. I just think that Trafford's in a situation where he probably knew once they got Donnarumma that he wouldn't be starting. But I think it could be like a Henderson situation, like a Dean Henderson situation for Man United, where he might move to another team and play. But I don't know because he's still young.
It's tough to tell at this point. He won't want to be a backup goalkeeper for too much longer.
Yes.
And Donnarumma's not an old goalie, so I think it is inevitable that he eventually moves on for Man City. And this time they probably won't have some sort of buyback clause in that deal.
Exactly. I think he'll probably go to another Premier League team. He just reminds me of just a Premier League goaltender. And I think you just go to another team in the Premier League. What that team would be, I don't know. I think James Trafford is a class goalkeeper. And, there's teams that are in the top flight that need that class goalkeeper. Tottenham's kind of one of them. I don't know if Vicario is that guy.
Well, it really depends on,
I think Tottenham
whether they stay up or not.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, Vicario has been under scrutiny.
Yes.
This season, and then they played Anton Klinsky in the first leg against Madrid, and he got taken out after like 15 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
So they definitely have some goaltender woes in Tottenham, and that's just another part of their rough season that could lead towards relegation.
Yeah. And we were talking about rough seasons, but let's talk about a season that's doing just someone doing really well this season and having a great season. And that is Danny Welbeck. So, Danny Welbeck is 35 years of age, and he was a former England international and a former Manchester United player under Fergie time. And he's been playing really well. What's your thoughts on that, Zach?
Well, he was called up to the English national team in their last window, but was taken out for this window, and then responded with a 2-goal game against Liverpool.
Exactly. Do you think that could make Tuchel's side in the World Cup this year. I think he's stated his case pretty well this season.
I think the removal from the side for the upcoming games is not a great sign. Even with the 2 goals, he might not get that call again. He is 35, and they might want to give opportunities to some younger players in that team. But, he is a player that's proven he can score in the Premier League, so it wouldn't be surprising to see him still on the team at the World Cup, but it would also not be surprising to not see him there.
He also played in Euro 2012, World Cup 2014, and World Cup 2018. So he's played in the World Cup. Another thing is he's the top English scorer this season in the Premier League. He has 12 goals in the Premier League this season. I was, looking at this stat as well. For people with like just league goals in mind, only Lewandowski has more goals than Danny Welbeck over the age of 35 in the top 5 leagues. In the top 5 leagues.
Where did all the other players go?
just talking specifically about the league. So La Liga and the Premier League. I think he has like 13 goals this season in the league. He's up there with some of the best, and especially Lewandowski is a very good striker. He's 37 years of age and still kicking it. So, I think anything's possible. I mean, if you talk about like I said earlier, if you talk about like World Cup 2014, World Cup 2018, he has experience, playing for the 3 Lions. But I think a lot of the team right now does already have experience. Like they were already in the 2022 squad, and they were in the Euro squad as well. They made it to the heights of to like almost as high as you can go really without winning it for the Euros especially. And I think that they might, he might not be called up because he wasn't called up for that team either. And yeah, I agree with you. If he's not like playing, if he's not playing for these couple friendlies, this 35-man squad that brought up is like kind of a tentative squad. And a lot of those players you're going to see again, unless they get injured. It could be a situation if one of our strikers that we're bringing up gets injured, then we call him up. If we talk about it, the other strikers, well, Harry Kane's a lock, but you have, Ollie Watkins, I'm pretty sure is one of the strikers for English strikers. You got Ollie Watkins.
You would know better than I would. I don't follow the English.
Yeah, you got Ollie Watkins, and I think Ollie Watkins, yes, he hasn't played well this season, but he's been a main man and the reason why we got to the Euro final, scoring in added time. So I think he could possibly be a guy that gets in. But, Danny Welbeck has shown, and it's not like he's like doesn't have the legs. Like he's shown he has the legs. He's shown he has the mentality, and his athleticism is crazy. Like he's jacked, and he is ready for, I think, to go to this World Cup, which would be his kind of last forte under the 3 Lions. And there's this thing with this celebration. He actually jumped over, jumped over, grabbed onto the guy's shoulders and kind of jumped over him for a celebration. And that guy was Lewis Dunk, who's 6'4". So he jumped over freaking Lewis Dunk, who's 6'4". In a celebration. And he scored in key games as well. The games that he scored in are not like against teams that are really bad. Think about it. The games he scored in: Manchester United. He scored 2 against Chelsea. He scored 1 against Newcastle, and he scored 2 against Liverpool. So those are like some of the best teams in the Premier League that he's scoring against. And obviously, if you're scoring in the Premier League, one of the best leagues in the world, you obviously have a chance in making that World Cup squad.
I think his age is a big player in the factor whether he makes it or not. Despite scoring in big games, with the other strikers on the national team already, does he even play if he gets called up is another question.
He probably won't play. If there's Harry Kane on the situation, usually, I think what happened under Southgate, I don't really know what Tuchel's going to do. I think I know Harry Kane's a lock to start games because of just how good he's played. He's 32 years of age, and he's honestly in the prime of his career right now with Bayern Munich, and kind of a potential Ballon d'Or player. But I think that, I don't know. I don't know if you play Harry Kane every single game, especially if you're in the group stage. Like, I think what you do is you let some players get their feet in the water a little bit, especially as in England. Like, I mean, England has so much depth in which you could start like a whole new 11 each group stage game and still get out of the group. Like, they're very good. But I think that definitely Danny Welbeck, if he's on that team, could maybe get some substitutions when we need it and be a key player. Obviously, I've seen it. He has the legs. He's playing a lot of minutes under Brighton, and he's performing very well. So I don't think that his age could be kind of a deciding factor. Maybe how he gets along with Tuchel. But if he I still kind of going around this thing that he's not on the team right now. He missed the 35-man squad, and I think that team going to play the friendlies. It's also the friendlies are in England as well, so it's like I think it's possibly a lot of those guys are locks, and unless they get injured, I think. He's played really well. I think it just shows that you can play longer now because of how the technology is. But I think England's also just a hard team to get into because of how good our players are. And we have a lot of players in the position. But in my opinion, Danny Welbeck has played better in the striker position than a lot of the strikers that could be playing this year at the World Cup, based off of his form. But he is only playing in the Premier League and, of course, in the FA Cup, right? He's only playing domestic competitions because Brighton isn't in Europe. So I think that could potentially be another factor because he's not getting as much game time. If you go into a World Cup where you're playing like so much games very close to each other, that could be a problem in the future. Obviously, he's battled with injuries in the past. You don't want someone to get injured at the World Cup because then you have to replace him. Obviously, it's happened before. It's happened to England before, and you have to replace that guy very quickly. So, he could possibly be a guy that gets on the team, but overall, I think it's just really impressive that he's kind of like a phoenix reborn into his prime, and I think it's really cool to see. Another guy that's playing really, really well is Bruno Fernandes.
There's some big news that just came out. Mo Salah is leaving Liverpool at the end of the season.
Oh.
Confirmed.
Oh, we should talk about that, though. Okay. So, obviously, Mo Salah scored a really good goal the other day. And it was, just a really good goal against Galatasaray, I believe. But that's huge.
Yeah, Liverpool announced she will bid farewell to Anfield at the end of the season.
Where do you think he's going? Saudi?
Maybe MLS, Saudi. Maybe he goes back to Italy. It's kind of hard to tell if he wants to just bank in the cash at this point in his career or if he wants to keep trying to win European titles.
Yeah, because he was obviously linked with Al Hilal a couple of years ago, or last summer, I believe. But he had, he was in the prime of his career last summer. He was doing really well. And then this season, he's kind of fallen off of form. And I think that it could be a time for him to leave, especially, he is a very expensive player just for the team, for his wages. So I think the team just wants to, free up some space so that they can get some new players.
I mean, he was part of that he was a very pivotal part of the team that won them the Premier League last year.
Yeah.
There's been so many rumors of him leaving to Saudi, and he wanted to clear up, any sort of misconceptions, and he wanted to be transparent about his future at the earliest possible moment with the Liverpool fans. And, it's come out today now that he is leaving, and with the connections to Saudi, I think it's pretty likely he goes there just based off of the rumors that were already circling around it. But I think he was a great career at Liverpool. Won them multiple championships, and I think he's a player that will be considered a club legend for Liverpool.
Exactly. And, he's been a kind of a journeyman throughout his career. Obviously, he played for Basel in Switzerland. He also played for, two teams in the Serie A. He played for Fiorentina and he played for Roma, and also playing for Liverpool as well. But yeah, he's a club legend for Liverpool. Obviously, being one of the guys that was key in them winning the Premier League, but also being, key in other tournaments as well. Obviously in the Champions League and winning the league there. And he could have won a Ballon d'Or at Liverpool. He was very close, but obviously Lionel Messi and a couple other players were fantastic that season as well. And of course they won. So I think definitely, he doesn't have a lot he's leaving Liverpool on a good note in the sense of his ability and who he is and the player, and they love him. But he's leaving on a bad note for, how he's acted this season a little bit. Obviously, he's kind of had moments in which he was a little bit displeased with Slot's delivery and kind of where he was taking the team. And obviously, Liverpool haven't had a great season. But I think it's just another thing. It's like he's leaving now, and wherever he goes, I think it's the Liverpool is going to love the moments they had him, and the team's going to love the moments that they have, the Egyptian king until he retires. But I think, he has nothing to really leave Liverpool angry. I think Liverpool loves him. I feel like, last season with the form that he was in, he was linked on leaving, but I think a lot of the team was like, we want you to stay because of how good you're playing. I think this year it's he's not playing as well, but I don't think that's a defining factor. I think he's okay. I truly do. But where he goes, I think is still going to be a mystery to me because obviously he's been linked with Saudi, but instead of going to Al Hilal, would it be better if he goes to Al Nassr with his former teammate Sadio Mane, so that they can kind of link up again and
I think it'll be a bit of a bidding war from
Yes.
from all the top Saudi teams in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that he goes somewhere. Obviously, he speaks Arabic, and that could be also another asset on going to the Saudi League, because I think arguably the Saudi League is the best Arabic speaking league in the world. So that could be another thing going there. But I don't think that's going to be a defining factor in him going to a team. I think, we're just kind of going off of assumptions that he will go to a team that he's linked with, and Al Hilal was one of them.
Well, Al Ittihad is the club I think that was previously the most likely to sign him, but now without Benzema on the team, I think it's a little bit less likely.
Yes. And, MLS is another thing. Speaking about MLS, actually, just came out today. Antoine Griezmann is an Orlando City player now.
I think, he's kind of been phased out of Atletico Madrid. He was a top player there for so long, and a player that kind of you would see the club and you'd think Griezmann, and he would, a top player for the French national team, and I think the MLS makes more sense for him than going to Saudi. I think his play style fits the MLS a little bit more, and I think he will be a big time goal scorer in the MLS.
Yeah, and obviously he still has this touch of flair and poise, and he's been a really good player for Atletico. Obviously, he's played for Atletico Madrid, Real Sociedad, and he's also played for Barcelona. But he's won everything. I think he's one of the best players to have not won the La Liga trophy. I think he is one of the best players to never win that league. Obviously, I think, he holds he holds a big place in my heart, being one of the players I grew up watching and loved and idolized. watching him in the 2016 Euros and watching him in the 2018 World Cup when France won it was just really cool to see. Obviously, he had sick haircuts and he kind of experimented with that. But I know him for his Fortnite celebrations when he scored the goal in the World Cup too. He did the Take the L celebration on the World Cup stage, which is just something completely I would never do. But I thought that was quite neat. And, he still has skill. He's done beautiful goals in the past couple of years. It's not like he's lost that much form. I just think, he's been phased out. Obviously, they have Alvarez now, and Atletico Madrid is that team where, if you can lose a player, Griezmann is a big loss, but he's won everything that he could have won other than the league. And now he's going to Orlando City, who's had Kaká and a lot of famous players play for them, and very cool jerseys. So it's going to be really cool to see it. And again, it's another professional player playing in the MLS. And it's really kind of putting North America back on the map.
Well, I think it's a warranted move at the stage of the career. He can go rival Messi at Inter Miami. So in-state rivalry against Messi.
Yeah. And, Orlando City has kind of they've lost a lot of their very good players. And obviously they're some of their best players have just retired just because of their age, like Kaká, and Pato actually played for them as well.
Well, he gets to play with the Canadian legend, Maxime Crepeau.
Exactly. Maxime Crepeau is now at Orlando. So, maybe Griezmann can just, shoot at him a little bit, get him warmed up to what a top 5 league professional shoots like, and maybe he's ready for the World Cup.
Well, I know you wanted to talk about Bruno Fernandes.
I am itching to talk about Bruno Fernandes. So I was going to talk about Bruno Fernandes last episode, but it just didn't get there. We were talking a lot about Team Canada, and we had a great discussion about them. But I missed to talk about Bruno Fernandes. I think for everyone, you should put some respect on Bruno Fernandes' name. There's some people that really criticized him. The criticism was warranted, I think, in some levels through his mental side of the game. But I think this season he should win the PFA Player of the Year. I think he's been one of the standout star players in the Premier League this year and in the English football system, and deserves to get that praise. He has 8 goals and 16 assists in the Prem, and he's on track to beat that record for the most assists in one Premier League campaign. Right now, Thierry Henry and Kevin De Bruyne have the record at 20. So and there's 7 games left this season, and he already has 16 assists. I think he will be the guy to overtake those two, unless he gets injured or unless he just does not get any assists.
Well, he'd need 5 assists in the last 7 games.
Yes.
That's a lot of assists.
It's a lot of assists, but he's known to get consecutive assists. And right now on Manchester United,
you don't get shut out.
Yeah, right now on Manchester United, it's kind of been pass it to Bruno. Bruno makes the play and scores. We've scored a lot of goals from set pieces. Casemiro has almost the most goals he's scored in one singular season throughout his whole career. And obviously he's going to be leaving next season. And, he's played absolutely insane. Bruno is one of the best players in the Premier League right now. And, he overthrew David Beckham's record a couple games ago, which was 15. And that record was made 26 years ago. I think the one thing that this says is we really desperately need to keep Bruno for next season, because Bruno's been linked on leaving, and he's kind of talked in a lot of things about how, basically saying that he would leave next summer if the things don't change. And I think things have drastically changed in Man United's eyes. And one of those things would be trying to keep such an informed player and such a player that's such a leadership player, and just a player that's, well, in the form of his life. So I think it's definitely, he could have left to Saudi Arabia in the summer, but he didn't. And I think that it's just really good. You know, I think his playmaking ability is top notch. But that's kind of just self-explanatory. He's played really well. If he gets all his assists, obviously his playmaking ability is really good. But, with Casemiro's exit now, I think he needs to be a guy that we keep in our midfield and then we add on to it. We keep him as the number 10, we keep Mainu, and then we get a center defensive mid, like a Warden, like a Baleba, into that role. And that would be a really good opportunity for Man United to be fighting for top four and possibly fighting for the league. I still think we have a little bit more ways to go. But he also has, 100 goals and 100 assists. And, that is just absolutely crazy to me because the other players on our team, I think it's Giggs and Rooney are the two other players that have 100 goals and 100 assists for Manchester United. So it really just puts into perspective how good he's been. What's your thoughts on Bruno looking from a kind of an outside lens?
He's been, I'd say, Man United's best player for a while now. I think he's been, you think of Man United, you think of Bruno Fernandes. He's always involved, and he's always a player you see, playing alongside, some of the best Portuguese players on the national team even, and a player who you can almost always expect to have some sort of impact on the game, even if, sometimes he can be a little bit whiny and like get that drama from the media. But he is a player that has talent. He is a top player, and I think with the recent players that have moved to Saudi Arabia, teams have stopped, they see a player who's aging and they immediately assume he's not going to be good anymore. I think it's kind of started, making a new narrative where teams don't want to have players that are over, 32 on their team anymore. And I think moving a player who has shown so much talent still, like a Bruno Fernandes, a move to Saudi Arabia doesn't really make sense. Whereas a lot of the players that have moved there, it made sense at the time, but I think a lot of those players could come back to Europe and still be top players.
Exactly. I've talked about my team, but your team, their last game, they played pretty well. Actually, no, they didn't.
No.
They lost 2-0.
It was a
But they
terrible
played very
game.
well the previous game, of course, tying against Manchester City, and then you've lost 2-0. What's your thoughts going into this international break, which is a huge break, by the way? Man United, I don't think, plays until April 12th. So what's your thoughts, going into this international break with West Ham and what they can do to improve and get out of relegation with only 7 games remaining?
Well, we need Somerville back, and he'll be back after the international break. Losing him was a big blow for our chances against Aston Villa. There was some rumblings that he could have been ready, but ended up not being ready for that game. So I think it gives us a chance to heal up a little bit. Todibo got injured in the warm-ups against Aston Villa, and we had to change the game plan and put Freddie Potts in the midfield, which I think just kind of messed the entire game up from the very beginning. He kind of had to change strategies, and it didn't work the way we thought it would. And it was a very poor game against Aston Villa, but Villa did play a very good game against us. And I think it's I'm not necessarily super worried about, that loss changing our overall form too much, where, because we lost 3-2 against Chelsea in heartbreaking fashion. Then we got like 5 points in the next 3 games after that, and we lost to Liverpool really bad. But then we won our next game after that. So I think the end stages of the season we've shown resiliency and bounce back, and I think we have some favorable games coming up before we have to play Arsenal.
Exactly. I think, if you look at the other teams, you were talking about this earlier, but like form, other than Notts Forest, you have a really good form for a team that's battling for relegation right now, comparatively to the other teams in the situation. I think Tottenham is not doing well. But Tottenham, I've checked their next games, though. I believe Tottenham has Wolves in their schedule.
We also have Wolves.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess it doesn't really matter.
Our next Premier League games against Wolves, then I think we have Everton, Brentford, Leeds to end the season.
So really, the cards are kind of on the table for you guys to
There
possibly
is
make the great escape.
very winnable games on our schedule down the stretch, but there's also some very winnable games for the other teams in the relegation fight. And I think, the Nottingham win against Spurs kind of makes things a little bit more interesting because now they've gained a little bit of a gap to relegation. They're 4 points out now, I believe. And it kind of makes it a little bit harder for us to catch them. And I think Spurs is the main fight we have to go against right now. And maybe even Leeds. I think they're also on 33 or 34 points and aren't completely safe yet.
And play Man United next.
We play Leeds for the last game of the season. I just hope that isn't the game that decides whether we stay up or not.
Exactly. And I mean, you're tied with Tottenham right now. But I think the main thing for you is to try to get points, but also try to win games to get your goal differential up. Because it could come to right at the end of the season being your goal differential is the stuff that matters for you to stay up or not. And I think for it's really important to make sure you have that stat because I think, winning is one thing, getting points is one thing. I think that's the main thing you should focus on. But, winning games comfortably is another. Trying to get goals, trying to not concede as much.
At this point, the points are more important than the goal differential.
Exactly.
You have to just try and win.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. I'd rather take a 2-1 win where they're fighting till the very end over a draw. So I think trying to necessarily, if we're in the lead towards the end of the game, just try and lock it down.
Yeah.
And not try and force another goal for the goal differential. I think it's just more important to get the result first.
Who's been your favorite player that you've seen on West Ham this season?
That's a tough question because there's been spells in different parts of the season. Recently, the last couple games, it's been Mavropanos. He's been, a brick wall. Without
funny photo.
Without Mavropanos in that game against Aston Villa, I think it would have probably been 5-0.
Well, without Mavropanos, you wouldn't have tied against Manchester City.
Mavropanos,
did the Scott Sterling.
He had the save with his face. He scored the header. He's been an incredible player for us in the last little while. But you can't fail to mention the resurgence of Somerville's form towards the end of the season. Mateus Fernandes has been, fantastic all season and just earned his first call-up to the Portuguese men's national team. No more youth teams for Mateus Fernandes.
And I think, it's deserved because the Fernandezes and the Fernandes are playing really well for their respective teams in the midfield. And, I think he's been one of your best players. He's been the guy that's facilitating a lot of your attacks and really showing West Ham's identity. I think for your team, as well, Bowen is always the guy that you have to bring in the situation. I think he's been Mr. West Ham since Noble has left your team. And I think for a team that's battling relegation, to have a guy that is like a Bowen who really wants to not I don't think any team wants to get relegated, but having a player that's played in the Premier League and having the identity of being a West Ham fan and a player that's actually winning trophies for them, I think is so paramount for your guys and your guys' success in possibly making that great escape. All right, so it's time to end the podcast episode. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about the EFL Cup final. We talked about, Erling Haaland's YouTube channel. We also talked about Danny Welbeck and the England national team. And we also talked about a little bit about Bruno Fernandes and West Ham. I think there's going to be some, really just to say at the end, there's going to be some exciting things to come. So whoever's listening, keep in mind that, there's some exciting content that we're going to create shortly and to look forward to that. All right, Zach, can you do your sign off?
bonjour, au revoir, and have a great rest of your week.
See you later, guys.